Spoilerin time, folks. A show where we take all the hard work we do on Cordkillers, figuring out all these streaming services and cord cutting options, and then finally watch our shows and get to talk to each other about them and what we felt about them. This week, we'll be talking about Larry Sanders Show, episodes 11 and 12 of Season 1, Rick and Morty, Season 4, Episode 3, Mr. Robot, Season 4, Episode 8, The Good Place, Season 4, Episode 9, The Mandalorian, Episode 3 of Season 1, and Watchmen, Season 1, Episode 6. I'm Tom Merritt, and that man right there is Brian Brushwood.
Hey, man, look, common complaint I get is you're not covering enough TV shows. Also, another complaint is that there's not nearly enough Justin Robert Young. So we're going to fix both of those. We're going to review like a bazillion D shows, but most importantly, welcome Justin Robert Young of the Politics podcast and the upcoming Raise the Dead podcast. But first, we have to check in and see how well he's doing in a little thing we like to call the Winter Movie Draft. Movie draft. Movie draft. Oh, wait, you're not on it.
Yeah. Well, no, Movie League Mike. That's the man I back. I back my man, Movie League Mike.
Charlie's Angels came out for Movie League Mike and did $10 million. Somehow Playing with Fire made $27 million for me, though. And my other movie last week, Ford versus Ferrari, $42 million.
Tom.
And so, yes,
Tom,
Brian?
I mean, I don't want to jump the gun here, but it looks like you're actually a contender. I know we've all been rolling our eyes, but you do kind of happen to have the number one highest grossing rated R movie in the history of the world right now in your pocket. And you do seem to have Playing with Fire doing better than expected. And Ford versus Ferrari seems to be acting like a grown-up movie that's going to end up making like $100 million. How you feeling right now?
I'm feeling pretty good because I still have Queen and Slim. Oh, no, that's not what I meant to say. I do have Queen and Slim and Black Christmas, but I still have Cats. And as much eye rolling has been done about Cats, I feel like that movie is going to have a good chance of making money because it has a built-in ravenous audience for it. Now, is Cats going to make, Joker money? No, it's not going to do that. But I need it to make enough money to push me in front of 85% of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. And right now it's still too close to call.
You got a ways to go. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But let's say Cats does. I mean, keep in mind, Cats was the longest running musical in Broadway history. This is sort of like a button on the end of it. Everybody who ever loved it is going to bring their kids and drag them out to all see that. You've got an all-star cast, everyone from Rebel Wilson to I don't know, Taylor Swift,
Elba.
Maybe she'll turn into something. I think that you're pretty well positioned, Tom. If anybody's going to take out Brett Rounceville, it's going to be you.
Yeah, I think you won.
Really? You think it's over?
Yeah.
What about Frozen 2? John Teasdale's got that coming out this week, along with Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood from Jenny Josephson, 21 Bridges for Jenny.
I saw Frozen 2, and I expect a fairly surprising drop-off on that movie. It was not the $75 of game dollars that John was hoping it would be.
I will say this. If we don't know the breakout song from Frozen 2, it's not going to do Frozen 1 money.
Yep, I agree.
And then this coming Friday, those movies I just mentioned were out this past weekend, but we don't have the numbers on them in the draft compilation yet. But this weekend, Movie League Mike has Knives Out, which I saw in a preview was really good. Probably not going to make huge amounts of money either.
Can we trade in the next week? Can you maybe try to see Jojo Rabbit and I'll try to see Knives Out, and then we could talk about them next week?
Yeah, I definitely want to see Jojo Rabbit. I mean, I've wanted to see Jojo Rabbit for like 3 weeks now. So I will do my damnedest to get in there and see it for sure.
Okay.
All right. We have Justin Robert Young here for many reasons, but one of those reasons is that he is a devoted fan of Watchmen. And we have been sort of channeling his opinions in our discussions of Watchmen because they differ from ours. So we feel like it's only fair to bring him in to talk about it. And we're going to kick it off with an email from Sean, who says, "Hey, Tom, Brian, Bryce, and friend of the show and Watchmen fanboy, Justin. Just watched the latest episode, and the whole William Reeves Hooded Justice origin story is quite possibly the most enjoyable, realistic superhero origin I've ever heard. Juxtaposition with the story within the story that whitewashes Hooded Justice's backstory makes all the better for the real origin story, like if Batman was real and widely believed story was Bruce Wayne was Batman until his death, when in reality Lucius Fox stopped putting on the cape and cowl when Wayne kicked the bucket. I really enjoyed the 106-year-old Reeves using the same mesmerizing tactics against the Klan/cavalry that the Klansmen used in the 1930s against the people in the movie theater. Not sure if this hit anyone that read the original comic book as it did me, but can't wait to hear from you guys about the episode."
Before we hand everything over to Justin, first of all, disclosure. I think it's worth noting that all three of us were Damon Lindelof skeptics at some point. I think all of us did not care for the writing of what was the Alien sequel that was not a prequel, that whatever it was.
Prometheus.
But Tom and I have been through the journey of the leftovers, and I feel like that left us a little bit changed in our opinion of Lindelof. Everything Justin's saying is coming from a place of not being a fan of Lindelof, but being a much bigger fan of the Watchmen original text than either Tom or I. Would that be fair to say, Justin?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't talked to Tom specifically about it, but I know that I am a diehard Watchmen fan, and I've read it many times. It came to me at a point in my life when the lessons rang very clear, and each time that I reread it, I learn something new about the writing and about the human condition itself.
So, with all of that in mind, you've been very patient through the early episodes. You've expressed a bit of frustration, and you've been aware that all of the critics out there have said that there's something special that happens in the 6th episode. And
yep.
I know that watching the 6th episode, I had a great time. I enjoyed it. I loved it. But I ran it through my Justin Robert Young simulation engine, and I just remember thinking, oh, Justin will not like this at all.
All right. So as you mentioned, the reviews as the series began were almost universally about episodes 1 through 6, and they were laudatory. And I can understand from the perspective of people who have watched The Leftovers that you don't have the idea of Lindelof's television writing as I do, which previously was Lost, and I loved Lost. I even really don't mind the last season. I don't mind the fact that they ended it on character beats as opposed to a science fiction world building beat or any kind of big mystery being resolved. It was all about the characters and how they interacted with each other and what they made of each other going forward. So it really left me with Watchmen to have the point of view that, like, okay, well, just don't. I mean, like, the more we start talking about the mystery boxes, the less I'm going to focus on that. I'm just going to focus on the people. What I found with Watchmen through episode 6 is a lot about the mystery boxes that I still have no faith will be resolved in an interesting way. The stuff that is resolved at the end of episode 6, which theoretically is our big mystery. Our big mystery for the season is who killed the sheriff. We have somebody come up and say, I killed the sheriff. And then it turns out he killed the sheriff by way of a magical flashlight.
Well, when you say it like that, it doesn't sound nearly as awesome.
I'm just saying, like, at the point that you got to who killed the comedian,
sure,
in the book, it is a thread, an inconvenient thread that, if pulled hard enough, could literally end the world. This is the beauty of the whodunit story in the original Watchmen book. This is not that show. And so before I get into the criticisms of the program, one of which is either intensely annoying or out and out blasphemy, I will say this. I hold nothing against people who like this program. It's fine. If you enjoy it, that's good. It's very creative. It's insanely well shot. That episode last night was a technological marvel, and the acting that is done in it is engaging. Really, the times in which I am most annoyed is effectively when it is interacting back with the mythology of Watchmen. And I think it has a very awkward relationship with that, where there are a billion notice me senpai moments where there are tidbits from the original series or ham-handed, if just over the top, like hit you in the head with a hammer moments of this universe is different. While the main things that I wanted from a Watchmen show, which is a credible mystery wherein archetypes of humanity interact with each other and reveal these deeper truths, I haven't gotten. And yes, you can substitute that for the fact that it is a brooding and exciting meditation on race. That's fine. I like meditations on race. It's just not Watchmen. And specifically the character for which is kept theoretically the most front and center is Adrian Veidt. Veidt now. I'm pronouncing it Veidt my entire life because I'd only read the stupid comic. But he's Jar Jar Binks. He's an idiot. Like he's an absolute clown that, and here's my blasphemy moment, that records a villain monologue revealing the fact that he engineered Mega 9/11 not only for the eyes of the president, Robert Redford, but also apparently to be circulated throughout Senate subcommittees. So hundreds of people know that Mega 9/11 was a hoax? Or is that just a feint? Another Lindelof trick to make you think that that's what he's doing, but really it's something else. Boy, the real magic flashlight is the plot, the mystery boxes we met along the way.
The real magic flashlight is the mystery boxes we met along the way. Just dripping. With, yeah. Listen, I think you've given a clinic just now into why if you have expectations for a story, it's riskier than if you don't. And I'm not saying you shouldn't or that you are wrong to have them. But when you have expectations going in, if you don't have them met, it's disappointing. There's no two ways about it, right?
Well, yes, but also
because I'm going to your point about, like, if you wanted this kind of story, it's fine, but I wanted this other kind of story and I didn't get that at all.
I wanted a story that was coherent with the name on the series. That's what I wanted. And I don't think that that's an unreasonable expectation.
No, I don't think so either. I'm enjoying it. And the reason I say this is I can't disagree with almost anything you're saying from your point of view, but I'm enjoying it not having that kind of care. I don't care that it's not consistent. And I read the graphic novel and loved it. I saw the movie and liked it. I like that we got the octopus back. I mean, that's great. Or squid. Yeah. So, I like that we got the squid back. But the fact that I don't care whether it's a squid or an octopus, I think is the dividing line between you and I.
So, Justin, the big question I had, I have a pretty good Justin Robert Young simulation engine in my head by this point. It's been a decade, right? I couldn't get a straight answer out of my simulation engine on your opinion about the idea that retconning Hooded Justice, and making him a black person who is white facing himself underneath his hood. Like, I couldn't decide whether my simulated Justin Robert Young would be cool with that or not cool with that. What was your take?
I think it's fine. It's fine to make him Hooded Justice. I didn't mind that story. I thought as a prequel kind of story of who Hooded Justice is, I think it was interesting. Obviously, it takes the series in a bit of a different direction. yeah, I don't know. I was fine with that. Really, it's just more cool. You've introduced a cool character and you told an interesting story within it. Where do we go? Where are we? Where are we now?
Okay. So at this point, we fold into me and Tom kind of giving our takes.
Go ahead.
I got to tell you, I loved The Leftovers because it built a world that I believed, and the characters were very strong. Did stuff happen? Kind of, I guess. You know, if there's any number of problems I have with the overall pacing of any individual episode, but the fact is, The Leftovers world lives in my mind. In this case, Lindelof seems to be at least dipping his toes into a universe that is pre-existing, and he's giving his own take on it, and that may upset some people and so on. But one thing he's definitely doing is episode by episode building out each of the characters in a very, very believable way. And they took one of the more cartoonish characters and made him very, very human in this episode. I loved it a lot. And I understand it's a sort of an info dump, like time for answers. Here's a MacGuffin. Let's go. But even then, I loved it. It was very powerful. I was riveted the entire time. And when I thought of seeing it through Justin's eyes, I remember just thinking, man, I wish for Justin that this just wasn't a Watchmen thing, because I feel like to an extreme degree that affects how you experience it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I've been approaching Watchmen with very little critical evaluation. I'm not trying to piece together the clues. I am letting it take me for a ride. And in that respect, the fact that this week's episode was in essence a short film, independent of the rest of the series in many ways, didn't bother me at all. There was at one point when I turned to Eileen and I said, like, wow, Damon Lindelof really wanted to make a film noir throwback, didn't he? And he found a way. But as it proceeded, I got more interested the more that he wove this story. And when it turned out that he was Hooded Justice, I found that interesting. Towards the end, it started to drag a little for me, when he got so mad at his son for putting on the makeup, and then his wife decided to leave him. That felt a little abrupt. But overall, I enjoyed it. I had a good time. And now I know a little bit more about that particular character's backstory, and so does our main character, who's now going to be able to take those memories that now that she's survived into her experiences going forward.
Even those moments of him yelling at his kid and breaking up with his wife or whatever, I felt like those were all sort of a nod to perpetuating a shame cycle or whatever that, in a pre-internet era was prevalent. I didn't mind it that much because it gave a bit of a reason of why he ends up a broken old man in a in a wheelchair.
I just didn't think they built up the motivation for that to happen, but it didn't ruin the story.
Of the four of us here, only one of us is watching the show, not having seen any of the source material, and I got a vibe that, Bryce, you're about done with this, watching week after week.
Oh yeah, no, I was out 2 or 3 weeks ago. After episode 3, I am, and I'm still at this where I'll watch it once the season's out and once I hear, because and I've heard this from other people who have not read the Watchmen, have not read the comics or seen the movie, that it's not for me, and there's nothing here for me yet. Maybe if there's something when they wrap it up, when they wrap the season up, but right now there's
only frustration.
Right. It's all fog, and there's nothing for me, and there's no promise of anything for me. So that's the thing I need to wait for, is to hear from y'all, basically, like, okay, this does work for people who know what's going, for people who don't know what's going on, or not, and then I'll just save a bunch of like energy and emotion over it.
Well, I mean, and that's, I mean, again, I know that this is just the most annoying thing to do is, but in the book. there is a theme that I think is inherent into the Watchmen story, which is suspense. Our protagonist in Watchmen is Rorschach. It doesn't mean that he's a good person. Doesn't mean that he has the right morals. It means that he's our protagonist. And he, a moral absolutist, is trying to solve a murder from a man that he knows, but has limited contact with, literally at the end of the world. 3 minutes to midnight or 4 minutes to midnight, whatever they are, there is going to be nuclear holocaust that totally destroys and decimates all of humanity. But he cares about whether or not this person was murdered for reasons that might affect a larger issue. And right now, and this is, I guess, much to the genre of Leftovers, which is why many Leftovers fans are super pumped about it, that urgency just seems totally absent here. And also absent, in my opinion, is, and I will say, except for is any credible villain, except for the one scene that introduced Lady True, which I will say was my favorite scene of the series, and was just an awesome, super compelling, like Twilight Zone episode or Twilight Zone mini story that opened up that thing. But beyond that, look, we've had more time spent where Lady True and our 100+ mystery box with his we had not yet seen his magic flashlight, literally have a conversation about how annoying drip feeding information to people are, as a gigantic big wink to the audience, like, haha, get it? This is what we're doing to you by having these people not actually exchange actual words, but rather more, they might as well just be spitting up computer keys, and all the computer keys are the pause button.
Yeah.
Anything else on the Watchmen, Brian?
I mean, I think I speak for Justin or for Tom and I when I say you're 100% right in everything you said. Still digging it.
Look, let me just say that I do not want to yuck on people's yum here, because there is enough out there of, I'm on the Reddit. Like I read all the reactions to it. I've read the critic stuff. There are moments in which that are lauded on either in critical discourse or on the Reddit that I think is out and out just terrible eye rolling writing. But it is there for some people. And if that's the case, then that's great. I'm glad people like it. I am not here to take away from anybody's enjoyment. I am here to say, boy, is it a hate watch for me, dog.
All right, let's move along to The Mandalorian and Baby Yoda, and what I consider in this third episode to be sort of a half reflection of episode 1, where he's kind of retracing his steps, takes everything, to its logical conclusion. It almost feels like the end of a 3-part series where he's like, okay, we're going to hand this baby in, and then decides, you know what? That child doesn't belong there. And now that I've thought about it, I'm going to go take it back, and busts out. You could even end the story there and say, and then the Mandalorian and the child went and lived happily ever after. Obviously, we're not. We're going to have the bounty hunters going after him for breaking the code. We're obviously going to have our client going after him to get the child back, and possibly other interested parties going after him to get the client back or to get the child back. Brian, what did you think?
Number one, keep in mind, love the show. Everything's great. It's the greatest show. Best Star Wars anything ever. I do feel like the first 2 episodes were truly remarkable because it earned every moment that it asked me to give something of it. If you, as Justin and I have talked about, if you told me in advance that there's going to be a Baby Yoda in this thing, I would have thrown up, my lunch. But by being so brutal, it convinced me that this is a harsh environment, and, it earned, and this is a brutal person. And so it earned the right to put something that cute in there. This was the first episode that kind of below the surface felt like, well, because now it's time for the Mandalorians all showing up like Superman, and in the final surprise we got you scene, felt a little bit. Oh, did we not mention that all Mandalorians have like some kind of code where it's all for one and one for all? Like, it seems like you could have set that up a little bit more.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I agree with you. Let's Talk About Star Wars, when we talked about this, it was explained to me that other people felt like they got that set up in the argument that he had when he was getting his Beskar turned into armor.
Yeah, I
still didn't feel like it was as convincing for me as it should have been.
I mean, I will say that was a great moment. He walks in all blinged out with brand new armor and all that stuff. There's a lot of really fun moments to it, but there was a little bit. The two moments that really pop out on my mind, and my kids don't in general burst out laughing when they're not supposed to. They burst out laughing when all the Mandalorians showed up to save the day. Like my 12-year-old and my 15-year-old recognize I don't want to say hack writing, but shortcut writing in those moments, and they burst out laughing at that. And then the other moment was, the weird Superman salute off to the side flying, got to get me one of them jetpacks things. This is the first of the 3 episodes that I kind of had to apologize for, both to myself and to my kids. Having said that, it's great. The series is great. Everything's great. Everything's fine. Mandalorian, don't show up unannounced at my house. But this is definitely the worst of the first 3.
I wouldn't argue with that. I do think that there are some sins in this episode that I think are magnified by the fact that it has a shorter runtime. I think if Mandalorian was a show that was a more traditional hour-long drama, that would probably last around 40 to 45 minutes as opposed to the mid-30s where it is now. You could have gotten a little bit more either in episode 1 or in episode 3 about our little, violence cult that also is there for the kids, which is, I guess, the Mandalorian sect and why they're being chased. I assume a lot of this will be explained to us going forward. But where I think they did an artful job of demonstrating without overly explaining why he goes back for Baby Yoda, the duality of, do I follow the code, or is the code only there so we can rescue and train up the people
foundlings
in society? Yeah, foundlings, the people that society has rejected. It did not do a good job in explaining why there's going to be this gigantic cavalcade of Mandalorians that will take out the shooters. I mean, my problem with that scene was twofold. Number one, obviously, look, they are looking to get all the greatest hits of Western tropes into this show. And one of the greatest hits of a Western trope is the hero's in the center of town and he has to shoot his way out. My two problems were this. Number one, how many episodes are we going to end where he is dead until somebody helps him? Like, he's supposed to be really good, right? And I get it every once in a while. Like, I loved it on the planet where Baby Yoda has to save his ass with the Force. Here, I was like, I mean, I don't know, man. Like, did you try to run away, go do something else? Like, I don't know. It just seemed a little bit of an odd choice. And you're right. By the time that the Mandalorians all come and save him, it's like, I don't know exactly how earned it is. That being said, you have what this show has built itself on, which is these quiet little moments between a character whose face we never see and, like Brian wisely pointed out, somebody that could be the most reviled character in the history of Star Wars that has earned its way into our hearts as one of the most beloved.
All right, we've got a lot to cover. So anything else on The Mandalorian?
No. Did you have any one-liners you wanted to give?
Who, me?
Yeah.
I would have given him. No, I pretty much the only thing I had to add was what I interrupted you with about
no.
all those Mandalorians.
So we're on the same page. Got it.
All right, let's move on to The Good Place, where we see Chidi wake up for a half hour, or actually longer.
Tom, look, man, there's a lot of TV. I almost made it. The last 10 minutes, I watched the first half of this, and it's like, it looked to me like they were setting everything up where they give us a bunch of backstory about Chidi, guess what? Young Chidi's just like old Chidi. And then they set up the idea that Chidi has to create a framework for all of morality in the afterlife. I'm going to go out on a limb, having not seen the last 10 minutes of this episode, that he doesn't.
They don't even get to it. He just wakes up.
No. Literally,
it's all backstory.
It ends with him waking up, and the one big realization is that indeed there are no solid answers that order the universe, but rather it is still special that he has Eleanor.
The whole story, I got a little less bored as I started to see where they were going with it, was telling you that Chidi got to be this way because of this, but with his experiences in the good place, he started to learn that there weren't answers for everything. And that's the moral of the story at the very end, is he left a note with Janet that said there are no answers. And so going into Chidi will help us figure this out. You now have a Chidi who doesn't believe there are answers for everything, which could be a detriment to solving the plan, but at the same time, potentially a decisive Chidi who will pick a plan without hesitating because he's actually grown as a character through all this. I thought it was a little bit of a ham-fisted way to get us there with Chidi by just sort of reminding us, like, remember Chidi was like this, remember when Chidi was like that, but remember when Chidi learned this. But maybe you kind of had to do it that way because he wasn't conscious of all of those memories through all of those experiences. I don't know.
Look, The Good Place is remarkable for the fact that it knows its characters, it cares about its characters, and all of its characters are on a journey. In fact, that is the one constant in a show that switches between metaphysical planes and reality and inside this mythology that we are kind of continually learning about. I know that Chidi's role is to find out how he can survive in a world that doesn't make sense to him. This told a very well spun story in that way. It didn't exactly advance the plot, but I did care about it.
And it advanced it an inch, right? At the very end.
Tom, that they should have just called it, like in the episode description, it should have just been Chidi finally wakes up with his memories intact and they get to work. Because that literally,
that's where we're left.
The entire plot from beginning to end.
I do increasingly find myself sort of wanting to recuse myself from legitimate opinions, because much like Game of Thrones, when you get that far along, it's remarkable that the thing even existed. And I remember just as we hit the last season, I'm just like, drift across that finish line. That's all I'm asking for you guys. And that's kind of where I'm at on Good Place. So,
well, and honestly, I don't think this is a bad episode. It's just that we're all hungering for the story, you know? And so taking time, which is what they did, it just makes me impatient. That's all. I'm still enjoying it.
That's always been the thing that I've not liked about The Good Place, is when they've had to cram in more character stuff, and not that there's bad character stuff, there isn't good character stuff there, but I mean, it's just telling about this show that the last episode of the year takes place over about 1 second in time of the story, and is all just flashbacks and more character gazing, and I think that's such a shame, but it's it's a network comedy. They have to stretch it out for a whole season, but
sure.
Ugh.
Anything else on The Good Place?
I will just say I watched the second to last episode and the last episode back to back. It was a much more enjoyable experience than watching it one episode at a time.
Makes sense. Makes sense to me. Justin Robert Young is going to bow out now because of the 12 shows we have left to watch. He hasn't seen them. But Justin, thank you as always for hanging out with us, and remind people again what the scoop is with Raise the Dead.
All right, here's the deal. If you're listening to this right now, and right now is November 25th, then go ahead and subscribe to the Politics stream. If it's after that, then you should go there immediately, because the first episode of Raise the Dead is being previewed right now on my Politics stream. You're going to be able to hear the first episode. A week from tomorrow, the feed launches, and folks, there is a unique 24-hour window where we're going to have to try to get this as far as we can up on the iTunes charts, because this is when it matters. It's something that I've been working on for over a year. I'm extraordinarily proud of it. It took a village of my friends in the Diamond Club and Frog Pants community to make it, and I'm very excited for everybody to listen to it. It is called Raise the Dead, and again, through the 1960 election of Nixon versus Kennedy, let it teach you the lessons you should have already known that would have made 2016 much less surprising.
Thank you, Justin.
Peace.
Folks, go check it out.
Spoiler alert.
All right.
It's great.
Yeah, no kidding. We should do spoiler time on Raise the Dead. It's so good. Let's talk about Mr. Robot. Almost felt a little bit of a letdown because the more I thought about last week's episode, the more I liked it. But it's not really a letdown episode. It's just that things started to roll a little bit forward here. I'm still expecting another personality to show up and something.
Oh, no.
I don't know, Brian. What do you think?
The third one, and by the way, I did not get to participate last week. Thank you guys, both of you, for making me leave the room. It was a delightful surprise to watch all of that. Brief thoughts on last week's episode. I'm sure you guys talked about it, but that was so wonderfully, deliberately shot and choreographed to be a play. I mean, down to the act 1, act 2, act 3, act 4, act 5. But it's like the staging of it, they pulled back just a little bit farther. Everything about it was, there's 2 rooms. Like basically, I want to do a play with a big realization at the end. It's kind of like 12 Angry Men, only at the end, instead of realizing the one guy's a racist, one guy realized he was sexually molested. Also, they did a good job of obviously somebody broke apart and created multiple personalities for some reason. So it's not the weirdest thing to imagine that there was a traumatic event that went along with it. This episode was a little bit of just sort of course correction. Like they had so much fun last week that it's like, okay, let's, are we cool with Mr. Robot being a personality in his head? Can they have a discussion reminding us that this is just a representation of an idealized version of his father and not the exact same person? Great. Okay, great. Good. Can we have an event where we're Dom and Elliot's sister, Darlene, are now on a team and they make it out of a thing? Great. I mean, it's a little bit just sort of business keeping, housekeeping.
On the idea of young Elliot being with a third personality, the quote unquote third personality, yeah. I think he might not be.
Oh no!
I think. Let me hear
go ahead.
Because when we had the episode about the multiple personalities and that there is another one. Remember at the end of that episode when we saw in the big boardroom, Elliot's mother and kid Elliot already there. They were the ones that basically told us that there was a third personality. I think that there's going to be another one.
There could be. I had read all of that as being, you can't let him meet and or talk to the third personality, the kid, for fear of what the kid would share. There is a difference in that we had seen his mom and the kid version of himself, but that was more represented as a memory, where as opposed to this was the first episode that he directly talked to the kid version of himself with the understanding it was like a bridge had been opened where it's like, okay, now we both know the thing that I must not know. What are we up to? What are we doing?
I think one other thing that gives me thought, and this might be more of an Easter egg thing, but in that boardroom scene, the table that they're at has 4 seats. And so if the mother and young Elliot are considered one, and maybe they're not, maybe they are considered separate, that might count them. There might be even more in play.
I really took that scene to be, you and I are talking about this other personality that isn't in the room that we don't want him to meet. And I do think that's yet to be revealed. I could be wrong. I'm probably a chump for saying this because you can look at it as Deus Ex Machina lazy writing, but I loved it when Dom just took advantage to pull the knife out of her own lung, slice a tendon, grab a gun, and kill everybody.
Okay, on top of that, I love
it.
that we saw Dom exercising any competence or any influence on the world around her whatsoever by the fact that this was a character that we had seen her interrogate previously, that she had clearly set up this relationship with. I loved seeing anybody take on the Dark Army and implying that maybe the Dark Army doesn't know everything and is not perfect at all times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it was great that we saw her training pay off too. Yeah, with setting up the Irishman to come and save the family. That was good. That was a good double switch as well.
I also love seeing the Irishman totally roll with it when he's talking to who he thinks is Dom, and it turns out it's not Dom, and then just as if it's no big deal. It's like, oh, you must be the other one, the one we're getting. Yeah, we got you.
Right.
Anyway, bye.
Yeah. No, that was well done. Anything else on Mr. Robot?
No, it's great. It's great.
All right. On to Rick and Morty, which I remember enjoying, but it's all starting to just kind of to fade.
No, here we go. Let me remind you. What happened was Dan Harmon sat down, pressed record on a podcast mic, and then ranted for 40 minutes about how much he hates heist movies, and the Rick and Morty episode came out.
Oh, right. This was making fun of the heist movies, making fun of cons, and with a little bit of pitching a Netflix show thrown in for spice.
Yes. Okay. Keep in mind 2 moments that I love very, very deeply, and I texted both of you guys. Mm-hmm. Beginning with a rant about how inconvenient it is to be a guest at a San Diego Comic-Con and not be treated appropriately. As a 10-year guest of Dragon Con can relate. And then closing with what it is like to pitch a TV show to Netflix, which, as somebody who pitched a TV show to Netflix, can relate. I enjoyed it. Amazing on all of that. But also, we're hearing a lot more of Dan Harmon just grabbing random voices and just playing them, because that was Dan Harmon. That was both of the computers in that, right?
I don't know. Was it?
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure it was.
And that was really Elon Musk.
That was Elon Musk.
Was in fact Elon Musk, and I thought that was brilliantly done too.
Very good timing for Elon Musk. A little bit of fun PR.
Little bit of something shiny over here to point to.
I gotta say, kind of a weak ending though. I think I know people on the discussion forums that I saw really have not liked this episode or last week's. I thought this episode was very good when they go out and look and see the star system and they go, oh, that star's not right, and they realize that they've been video screened with the wrong night sky. I think that's very good. I thought having to turn around like, oh, this is also Rick can keep Morty as his like eternal like sidekick slave. I thought it was a little like one note for as much as the rest of the episode tried to feel on theme.
I didn't read that depth into it. I don't think you're wrong for going there. That's certainly implied, but I took it all as sort of a light, like everything is just an indictment of the Ocean's movies and how lazy that story writing is. Like all of this just seemed like a flex from Dan Harmon on storytelling. Part of that almost certainly is fueled because my 15-year-old is starting to write stories, and so I introduced her to Dan Harmon's Story Circles, which if you type in Dan Harmon Story Circles, you'll see a 15-minute YouTube video that sort of breaks down. It's a simplified version of the Hero with 1,000 Faces, the Joseph Campbell story. And so I managed to get Penny to watch 2 full episodes of Rick and Morty, which is about all she could stomach before, running upstairs. But through that lens, it was just more of sort of, I read it all as kind of a meta-analysis of that trope.
Oh, sure. I think it would have been even stronger if they had lopped off this whole, like, he's doing it so that Morty can become self-disillusioned on his own merit, quote unquote, of pitch. Like, I don't know that that's the best ending for this. And that feels like,
but you've never pitched to Netflix.
Oh, shut up. Oh, my God.
Because
unbelievable.
All right. Anything else on Rick and Morty?
This is our last.
No, it was great. It was my second favorite. The first episode was truly extraordinary. Second episode I was kind of cool on. This one is my next favorite.
All right, let's finish up with Larry Sanders' show, the Warmth episode, where Larry wonders if his audience actually likes him. There's some focus group fun in there. And then A Brush with, parentheses, the elbow of, end parentheses, greatness, where Larry is accused of inconsiderate behavior when he knocks down a lady by accident at a local supermarket. What did you think of these, Brian?
I felt kind of the same way on both of them, where I really wish they were self-contained episodes, but instead both of them very clearly were setting up like a long-running through line, I guess.
Were they? I didn't notice that.
Really? Sorry, you did or did not?
I did not, no.
Yeah, well, so the first episode, he becomes obsessed with focus groups and pleasing everyone. Of course, the lesson he's supposed to get is that he can't please everyone, but it ends with him still trying to please everyone without any kind of epiphany on his part. So I assume, I'm like, okay, put a pin in that. That'll come up later. He wants to try to please everyone. He's constantly playing catch up.
And he's a TV show host, right? He needs an audience.
Right. A news story. You have I don't know, like the 1990 version of a Me Too moment. Yeah, that's reductionist. Forget I said that. But some kind of incident where everybody's taking the side of this person, and it ends up inflating and becoming a thing. And in trying to address it clumsily, he makes it worse. But of course, nothing gets resolved, and then credits roll. So I feel like I've been handed a bit of homework going into future episodes, and as a result, neither one of them really felt that satisfying by the time I was done.
You thought that it was setting up a storyline rather than like showing off these facets of Larry's personality? Because I feel like they're just personality trait portraits of him, right? He's conceited and he wants to please everybody, but also do things his way. And he like is very blinders and completely missed or didn't even notice, or maybe he was lying to everyone about bumping into this woman.
But they also, in previous episodes, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I perceive that in previous episodes, they did a good job of kind of closing the loop on most of that stuff, so I could put it, in a bottle and up on the shelf. Whereas both of these kind of very deliberately ended with crisis still in progress. Like he's still, he resolves nothing from his obsession with focus groups. You could maybe say they put a button on it where he doesn't like the answers he's hearing and he walks out of the viewing room. But the second one, like, it's very clear he has a clear and present danger of a legal threat from this one fan or person who's the tempest in a teapot right there.
Yeah, I think, I see what you're saying especially about the brush with greatness lady. Potentially they could bring a lawsuit back. I didn't put much thought into that, though, to be honest. I just assumed like these are, like all the episodes we've seen, exploring aspects of Larry's character as a celebrity. And these are essential parts of that. Like the party before that was sort of, dealing with his private life. There was the marriage episode, and now we've got the self-confidence episode with the focus group stuff, and the self-centeredness episode with him worrying about his reputation, not really worrying about whether he harmed someone or not.
Yeah, I guess the previous episodes, and I might even be wrong about this, but I had perceived them as having been buttoned up. Like the party episode ended, I'm like, oh, the lesson is don't mix work with home. And we got a button on that, and that's the last time we have to worry about that. Whereas these last two, both of them kind of felt to me like they were very deliberately left, hey, keep this in the back of your mind. Might be important later.
I think it's interesting that you are... I feel like the one that the most consistent storyline that doesn't get kind of reset in the way you would expect a sitcom to do is Larry's relationship. I mean, it feels like more episodes than not so far have been he's messed up his relationship in a pretty significant way, and then next week they're still together, and it's not even, they still have a rocky relationship, but it's not the same problem that it was before. I think it's interesting because like you expect sitcoms to reset, or there's an assumption that it resets, but just the way that this is shot, it feels like that's not the case.
And maybe that's something that they wanted to introduce slowly over time. And maybe this will be a persistent thing for the rest of the series, is nothing ever really gets buttoned up nicely. The episodes leading up to this, I thought they did a pretty good job of, just putting a bow on everything.
Was it a button or a bow? Or is it buttons and bows?
It's a button bow. It's a button that you press and a bow appears. It's a bow tying robot, Jetson style.
That's right.
That's amazing. Well, that's going to do it for us. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, television, for being so great that we just can't help but talk about all of these shows.
On behalf of all of us to television, just take it easy a little bit. You don't have to work so hard. You don't have to do so much.
You don't have to work so hard to impress us. We love you, television.
Yeah.
It's okay. You can support us, patreon.com/Cordkillers, and we'll spoil you again next time.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.